Good day and welcome to the Art and History in Fiction podcast. And this time I'm going to take a subject near and dear to my heart and give you a little background information on it. It is the medieval minstrel carvings that are in Beverley Minster in Beverley, East Yorkshire, England. And these are near and dear to me because these were the topic of my master's degree thesis. So as I talk about a little bit later, I was living in England. I needed a topic for my thesis. Beverley was 10 miles south of where we were living, and I went in looking for stained glass or maybe an illuminated manuscript, something pretty and bright, filled with color. And there is medieval glass in Beverley Minster, but it's all in the east window. And it's a big window. And I stood there and looked at it and just thought, I would love to do this, but I can hardly see it. I've got to try to figure out a way to get permission to research it, get scaffolding set up, get up there and look at it. And no, that's just not going to happen. So I'm roaming around the minster, as I often did, and then I realized there are these carvings along the nave north aisle wall. Minstrels, secular minstrels, a whole series of them there, and it was those that I chose to do my research on. And this was in the late 1980s. I finished my thesis and graduated from Southern Methodist University in 1995. And the thesis has pretty much sat on my bookshelf until I had the idea for the Stonemason secret. So I want to talk a little bit about the carvings and other details in the book, what is fact and what is fiction. So here we go with the medieval minstrel figures in Beverley Minster. The Stonemason Secret, my forthcoming novel, follows the adventures of art historian Sarah Walker. While doing research for her dissertation, she discovers mysterious symbols carved on several of the minstrel figures in Beverley Minster. She has to find the clues, figure out how to read them, and recover the powerful cup of Jamshid before the remaining members of his guard can claim it. The clues carved on the figures are fiction, which I created for my story. The cup of Jamshid is an ancient Persian legend, and there is no evidence that it existed. The medieval minstrel figures, however, are real and form the largest collection of carvings of medieval musical instruments in the world. I discovered the figures while living in England in the late 1980s. Needing a topic for my master's degree thesis, I explored Beverley Minster, 10 miles down the road. Seeing the minstrel figures and learning they were not well researched made them my ideal topic. How many carvings are there and where are they located? There are carvings of figures with musical instruments throughout the minster. Most date from the 14th century. There are 27 secular musicians or minstrels decorating the nave north aisle. 24 of them are on the molding label stops about 6 feet from the floor, and they measure about 18 to 24 inches in length. Carved during the second quarter of the 14th century, they were damaged during the dissolution of the monasteries in the 16th century. Many have had parts restored, yet much of the original carvings remain. Secular figures are rare in medieval art, especially in a church. A large number in relatively good shape provide a wonderful record of medieval instruments, playing styles, and clothing. Across the nave, there are 3 badly damaged figures on the south aisle label stops. So little remains that we can only assume they were similar in style and subject matter to the north aisle figures. The central nave has 18 figures placed at the top of the arcade columns. These figures are a mix of angels, elders, and secular musicians, and are more typical of what is found in medieval art. I believe they represent figures from the Mystery plays, which were performed in Beverley. These figures date to the same time as the North Aisle figures, and some scholars believe they may have been completed first. There are two tiny figures of musicians on the Two Sisters tomb. Sitting between two nave piers on the south side, it dates from the 14th century. 7 figures playing instruments, mainly angels, are on the canopy of the Percy tomb. The tomb on the north side of the choir was built in the 1340s. Topped by an ogee arch canopy, it is one of the finest examples of decorated carvings in England. It remains almost intact, which is rather miraculous considering the damage to the north and south aisle figures. 5 figures of musicians decorate the reredos, the decorative screen behind the altar. These can be observed from the retro choir, and there are 2 in the vaulting and 3 on the arcading. These date from the 1330s. 7 carvings of musicians and instruments are on the misericords in the choir. 5 of them are animals playing instruments, and 2 are musicians. These date to about 1520. Misericords are hinged wooden seats in the choir stalls. When turned up, they provide a ledge to lean on during services. The carvings are located underneath the ledge. Why feature the North Aisle minstrels? Of all the minstrel figures in the Minster, why did I pick the ones along the North Aisle to put the clues on in my book? From a practical standpoint, they are the easiest to access. I can imagine that someone in the 1340s could have pulled up a small ladder and reached around the figures to carve clues on the back. This also gives my protagonist easier access to them as she is hunting for clues. All other carvings are too high, too small, or in the case of the South Aisle figures, no longer exist. From a personal standpoint, this is the series I spent the most time viewing, again because they were so easy to access. After spending hours walking down the aisle and looking at them, I wanted to share this treasure with others through my fiction. So could clues actually be carved on them? Who knows? I never found a mention about anything carved on the back of the figures during my research. While they do project out from the stone they are carved from, there is not a lot of room back there. Though it has been 30 years since I've seen them in person, I do believe that it might have been possible for a medieval mason to climb up and carve in the rough symbols as I describe in the book. Who carved the figures? And this is where we're talking about who actually carved the figures that are in Beverley Minster. While we don't know the names of all the masons who may have worked on them, we do know who the master mason was. William de Malton was born in Huggett and worked at York Minster and St. Andrews Bainton before going to Beverley. Huggett and Bainton are both villages in East Yorkshire. He was appointed Master Mason at Beverley Minster in October 1335. His mason's mark, a double X, and stylistic elements from York Minster can be found on the North Aisle in Beverley Minster, indicating he did work there. I have not found a reference to when he actually died, which allowed me to create one that fit the plot of my book. If you are in Yorkshire, please consider stopping by Beverley and visiting the Minster. It is a wonderful medieval church the size of a cathedral and filled with carvings, tombs, and other works from the medieval period and beyond. The town and Minster are not as crowded as York, making it easy to roam around and take in the sights. But, as in the book, If mysterious clues are ever discovered on the carvings, all of that could change. So that's a little bit about the minstrel figures that feature so much in my book, The Stonemason Secret. The figures are very much real, the clues are very much made up, but it still is a good way to introduce a lot of people to some works of art that aren't well known, but I think deserve some recognition, and certainly they played a huge role in my life, and they are very, very special to me. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Art and History and Fiction podcast. I'll be back next time and share a little bit more information about some of the locations that are in my book and the works of art that are found in each of them. So until then, have a great day.